Okay, thank you everyone. So whenever you have a question, please feel free to stop me or put it in the QA box. I'll try to answer them as fast as I can. So before we proceed, the primary idea of this talk is basically to sensitize most of the cybersecurity community in India about the impending cyber threat that we have from China. And because see, we have a very hostile relationship between both of us as countries, and we are all the fastest growing economies in the world. And there are a lot of other small issues that we all know. Now, my whole idea of this talk is to help most of the cybersecurity community in the world, not only in India, because I know most of the viewers are also from outside India and China, other areas, is to give them an insight into how the Chinese cyberspace or the cyber threat space operates, and what type of control the government of China, which is basically Chinese Communist Party, has on them, and how it impacts us. So we are also trying to share a report that we have made around a year ago. So it doesn't pertain to India, but it pertains to the operations that we have spotted. And I hope it would have stopped their operations. So which went on for around 9 months. We are calling it Operation Red Rat. So we'll cover that too in the end of the presentation. So whenever you have any questions, please feel free to stop me in the middle of the presentation. Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead then. Yeah, so basically, why are we worried about the Chinese cyber threats? This is the basic premise with which we start working. And of course, there are also other concepts like, what's the difference between the cyber war and the information war? And how does the Chinese cyber threats, which are primarily the organized state-controlled threat groups operate? And what is the direction that they receive from their political system? And there is a new creation which happened in 2016, which became very effective in 2020 onwards. It's called People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force. So what is the strategic support force? Why do we think this is at the heart of the major threats that come from China to us? And we conclude the presentation by talking about a small operation that we have observed, targeting largely Vietnamese and the Thailand population. So we'll cover, and of course, then we can go back to QS again. Okay. Yeah. Now let's look at the type of attacks that we have seen in India before the Galwan War or just around the Galwan War. You can clearly see all these hacks have been targeting multiple critical sectors for our country. Air India was hacked, Air India data got leaked, BFSI nuclear software was a very important service provider for most of the banks. Domino's data got leaked, and many health companies, pharmaceutical companies related to India were attacked. And some of them have denied, but then we all know there is some amount of information available on the dark web and other places that the data got leaked. You can simply see there was also a leak of Kudankulam and ISRO. Probably the attack would have predated by at least by 6-7 months. So you can also see a lot of data. And of course, nobody can forget the power grid failure or the local power grid failure in Mumbai, which happened under the Tata Power. And there were continued attacks on Dr. Reddy's and Big Basket and whatnot. So, and you can also see clearly there is a pattern in this. If you observe very carefully in the last 1 year, all the critical sectors have been targeted in one way or another. And you can also see very clearly that there is also an active collaboration or active involvement of APT-36. Now, APT-36 refers to a Pakistan-based attack group whose multiple IOCs and multiple information pointers have led us to most of the Chinese-based sources or Chinese-based links. So this is also a very interesting development. Now, if you see during the conflict or the pre-conflict or the post-conflict time when it comes to India, we always see a sudden spike in the cyber activity, sometimes as if it is intending to be a warning to our country. And we also see parallel coordinated activity by the groups from the Pakistan as well. Now, in the intelligence and the discussion circles, people usually question and say, we are never at war or peace in cyber. We are always at no war and no peace. So this is a phase between the war and peace. So conflict is always going on. There is no official announcement that we are at war with each other, and neither we are at peace with each other. So this is the state of affairs in the cyberspace today. Keeping this in mind, let's try to study the possible objectives that a cyber attacker or a cyber warfare unit would have achieved by doing these type of activities. Now, we all know in cyberspace, there are two possible objectives. One is the espionage, which means stealing of valuable information. And second is to inflict a damage or destruction. The 3 Ds, the destruction, disruption, and degradation. The 3 Ds. So you can also quickly see if they would have got access to the Air India's travel details. So we know that that was a very sensitive time for us. There was a lot of activity happening in the Jammu and Kashmir region and other region. Some of our senior army officers or the civil servants or the ministers would have traveled back and forth. There could be other people traveling back and forth. So the travel details and visits, it would definitely help the country make an assessment on whatever activity is happening in that region. So this is what I would call as a espionage objective. Now, warfare objective is to indicate them that, you see, I have so much access. If I need it, I will simply ransomware it your core logistical supply chain in that region. It's also a quiet message. Probably this is what I think is intended in the Tata Powerwala case, and subsequently a similar incident also happened in the Ladakh region as well. The power grid was again failed. So now these at least have drawn me into a conclusion that we have continuous attacks that are coming in, and those attacks also cannot be ignored as a random chance happenings. So they may look like a lot of mad things happening, but there is definitely a method in it, and we should start taking them seriously. And by the very nature of cyberspace, this work cannot happen without the active involvement of the community and also private sector players and also the government. So there is some amount of work we all have to stand up and do together. So that is the primary intent in highlighting this. And we can also see healthcare data during the peak of COVID. There were huge number of attacks that were happened on all the manufacturers of the COVID vaccines. So this is also a very clearly documented fact. Now, this also needs to be very, very clearly observed. Yeah. And now, is it just only cyber war? There is also an equal competent angle of information warfare, creating multiple propaganda narratives. So generally, this is assigned to a unit called 311 unit in the Fuzhou region, which is basically bordering Taiwan. So people generally believe that it is largely targeted towards Taiwan, but however, I think the activities that are observed indicate that this group also targets information warfare campaigns actively against all its adversaries. Yes, they do have a problem in dealing with India because India is by definition a multilingual country. And dealing with multiple languages is a big challenge. Just the way we have a challenge in understanding Mandarin, they have a challenge in understanding most of our languages. So I think there is also some element of engaging rogue militias and outside groups in dealing with the information warfare objectives against our country. So this is also another great matter of importance to us. You can clearly see they are blending three different types of warfare along with cyber warfare. Now, through cyber warfare, you steal the sensitive data, then you weaponize it into an opinion and start peddling that opinion through multiple sources so that the person is overwhelmed. And also create compulsion, like create a new type of enforcements or any activity of coercion that the government would be forced to do. Now, that would again lead to another international hue and cry. So this is a very complicated but very straightforward strategy in destabilizing the governments which are operating in the region. And we will also see how the Operation Red Rat that we are discussing in this presentation would have helped them achieve these type of objectives in the subsequent slides. I see a lot of interesting questions. I'll answer them at one go. Yeah. So now let's try to understand the Chinese political system. The Chinese political system is very, very different from the India. Now, in India, we have armed forces. The Indian armed forces pledge their loyalty to the Constitution of India and to defend the Indian citizens. Now, on the other hand, the People's Liberation Army of China is just an armed wing of the Chinese Communist Party. Imagine it like this. Let us take any party X in India has its own military unit. The loyalty of the military unit doesn't lie with the people of the country, but to protect the party. So People's Liberation Army is basically a private armed wing of the Chinese Communist Party. The PLA's purpose, the first purpose, is always to uphold the revolutionary leadership of Communist Party of China. It is created on 1st of August, so you will always find them talking about Bai or 181881. They're very sentimental about these numbers. So they are thoroughly brainwashed to ensure that the only future of China lies with the Communist Party. There is no other future possible. Now, who heads the military unit of the People's Liberation Army, or who decides? In India, we see the Minister of Defense takes all the calls. Our defense minister takes all the calls, and the cabinet takes all the calls, or the prime minister takes all the calls. On the other hand, if you go to China, they have a very different type of a structure. The Communist Party of China dominates all spheres of government. Now, government is the one subsidiary or the subordinate unit under the party. So they have two different types of verticals. The one vertical is where the party decides military matters through a very unique structure called as Central Military Commission, which I will cover in the subsequent slide. Then there is a civilian government, pretty much parallel to what we have in Government of India. So that is called the State Council. But State Council cannot take big policy decisions. They are more like a management group. Now the boss has decided something and they will ask the State Council to execute it. Now State Council comes up with regular plans, like all bureaucratic work of filing papers, checking and all that stuff. The big decisions are always taken by the head of the party. Now how does party rule itself? Or how does party find leadership? Like we all know Xi Jinping is the president of China. In fact, president is the least of his designations. His most important designation is the general secretary of the party. And the second most important designation for him is the chairman of the Central Military Commission. Now, being the general secretary of the party, he's number one in the party of China. Now, we'll come to the next part. So there is also a small cabinet, equivalent of cabinet in China is called the standing committee. They're elected every 5 years. In China, most of the elections are predetermined and through long sequence of consultations. It is not like, someone decides what is important and then they just approve it as a rubber stamp. No, it doesn't happen like that. There are a lot of negotiations and balances, but all of this is done behind the covers. So there is no voting like the way we happen in India. So there, mostly everything is nominated and quietly managed. So they get a 7-member team, sometimes a 6-member team called a standing committee. So it looks like the 6 people are equal, but no, they are not equal. So in the sequence of order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is a hierarchy. The first guy is always the general secretary of the party. He actually runs the show. Number 2 is the bureaucrat who maximum runs the state council. Now, when you hear things like the Chinese defense minister has visited India, so the person who's visiting is basically from the state council. He has no policy authority. He has no legal authority to commit or decide anything. All the decisions on military front or even the diplomatic front are to be vetted out only by the party or the Central Military Commission. So in relation, if you see the Defense Minister of China is effectively the chief spokesperson of the Central Military Commission. So this is a very big difference. This is what people don't generally understand. So a lot of things change when you try to understand from this point of view. Like I said, the true Ministry of Defense is the Central Military Commission. The General Secretary of the party is also usually the chairman of the Central Military Commission. And Central Military Commission generally has 2 vice presidents. Both of them are serving military officers and the trusted men of the chairman. So through this institution, they control the armed wing of the party, which is the PLA. Now, as if this is not enough, there is always a party person present in every army unit. He is the most important person. So at a senior level, like a unit, army, battalion or something, they are called the political commissars. This is basically something similar to the Soviets. So the political commissar is basically a very high-ranking officer. He could also be a uniformed person. His job is to ensure that the People's Liberation Army is always loyal, and their officials and the soldiers are always loyal to the Party of China, Communist Party of China. And CMC controls all the transfers, promotions, and everything. So this is how the iron grip of the Communist Party of China is maintained on the PLA. Now, this is absolutely important because without this understanding, we can't understand what type of warfare or why would PLA or any of its armed constituents wage a cyber war with India or for that matter, USA. This is a very essential understanding. Now, let's quickly understand other 2 components which are very delicate, which are generally not much talked about. So they also have agencies pretty much like any other country too. But these agencies for intelligence collection are also monitored very closely by the party. And they also have a very, very important institution called CCDI, Central Committee on Discipline and Inspection. So through the CCDI, the Communist Party of China can interfere in the functioning of any institution. Imagine it like Supreme Court, CBI, Enforcement Directorate, all combined into, plus Central Business Commission, all of them combined into one unit. It is the God. So this institution head is almost always the closest person to the president or the general secretary of the party. Now, along with this, there is also a huge amount of control that is exercised on the PLA soldiers and political institutions through Ministry of State Security, which you can draw a rough parallel as a foreign intelligence agency. It could be something similar to CIA or something similar to RNDW in India. On the other hand, you can also draw a parallel to an institution called MPS, Ministry of Public Security. A rough parallel to that would be Intelligence Bureau in India or the MI6 in the UK component. So this is how the party maintains a very tight control on the PLA, and through this, it executes its vision and will. Now, the unfortunate part generally is why do we have to even discuss these concepts? Any person who works in the cyber warfare space, he's supposed to know these type of things. But no, it's not. Because in China, unfortunately, because of the language and because of the differences in the political system and economic system, people don't really understand how China operates. On the other hand, if you look at it, there is nothing secret in China. Everything is communicated very clearly, but by many different organizations. Like, for example, let me remind you all, we use a word called Mandarin to represent bureaucracy in India. Why only in India? Even the all English-speaking countries, we use the word Mandarin to describe a bureaucrat. In fact, the very word Mandarin came from China. China has a huge bureaucracy where they constantly publish and write and do. If you are a good China watcher, you exactly know which institution to track. And if you track that institution, you are in a pretty good position to predict their policy decisions. So what we really need in understanding China is patience and consistent efforts. We can very, very accurately predict what their next moves are. Like, for example, be it the disputes with India, be it a dispute with any other country, they deliberate, for a long period of time, publish articles, documents, and finally take an action. So this is one advantage because of the bureaucratic mindset or the culture that they have built. It could be their Confucian type of impact on their culture. It could be anything else. But yes, this is how China works. So there's nothing secret in China. If you know what to track, you can track very easily. And adding to this, the intelligence culture of the Communist Party of China is also very different. They collect enormous amount of data. How many of the Chinese-made phones are used in India? All the Chinese-made phones connect back to China. So it could be a clever strategy, or it could just be a manufacturing process that they follow, because they don't make phones separately for India. Whatever phones they sell in China, they sell in India too. All phones made in China have to go through the Chinese sensors, Chinese servers for scanning. So the same phones that are sold in India also have to go through same logic. Imagine them suddenly seeing a lot of red dots moving on the border region. They know that it's the Indian Army moving, because Indian Army personnel also use Chinese phones. So it's a very clever strategy to quietly conquer. So on the other hand, an agency like CIA or the MI6 would do James Bond type operations to get the same data. Now the Chinese, you can see very quietly they get it without much headache. So the roots of all this intelligence culture starts from their humble bringings. Like the Communist Party of China started as a small guerrilla organization without any resources to fight against a mighty state, which was under the Kuomintang Party, which is currently now exiled in Taiwan. So Taiwan was controlled by Kuomintang Party, which was actually ruling China in 1950s. So after the post-World War era. So the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, fought against them very successfully without weapons, without anything, by using the guerrilla tactics. So they still keep this flow. They still have that culture of minimum effort, maximum information. And very painfully, they go through a bit by bit of information to derive right conclusions. So this is also another grade. So because of these challenges, they use everything that they have access to as a source of intelligence. I remember reading in some of the books which I really like following up about China. So there was a color solution for camera prints, so which was released in a conference in the US. So the Chinese have simply asked a professor who was visiting the conference, do nothing, just go dip your tie in the solution and come back. That's all we want. Now, this is not how an elaborate plan probably a Western country or any other country would hatch to test that solution. It's a very simple but very effective solution. So this is a very different type of a threat that we are dealing with when it comes to it. Now, come back to what the party's guidance to army is. It has changed significantly from 1960 to 2015. In 1960s, Mao was the primary leader of China, and he was more interested in fighting for an imminent war or a major war and a nuclear war. And Deng Xiaoping talked about different type of circumstances, like there was internet connectivity, radars, and all that. Then Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, they saw the Gulf War, and that really shook them. They understood we need to extensively make a informatized environment, which means all the warfighting units share information with them constantly to maintain complete visibility on the war zone. Now what Xi Jinping is thinking is informatized local wars. He says the information itself will create the war. So you using information dominance, you create a scenario of war, then manage the whole war by peddling information in and out. Now this comprises of cyber war, information war, and all other components of war. It's a very, very effective, and they've been trying it. In fact, if we closely observe how Galwan happened and what happened post Galwan and all those events, you will see this executed in brilliant fashion. So consequently, the whole PLA had to constantly change because the direction that they received from their bosses is kept on improving and changing. Now, PLA has three big components: Joint Staff Command, which centralizes all the three forces or the four forces that they have, and then brings them under one common structure. And there is a concept of theater commands where they basically clearly identified, okay, if I'm fighting India, this is the command which will fight India. Now, the Western Theater Command is tasked with the responsibility of defending the West borders, which primarily means India. Now, Western Theater Command, the person heading the Western Theater Command, the theater commander, can command the Air Force, all the forces of the PLA at one go. Now, again, here the cyber force comes in. So they start talking about a very interesting thing called as MOTW, capability of conducting military operations other than war. I'm sure you can see it in the below. There's a very simple. I said there's nothing secret in China. They openly write it. Now they say, yeah, apart from winning the war, they also want to have capabilities to conduct military operations other than war. Now this is also a very interesting concept to observe. So similarly, strategic support force is the most important force that they have in mind. And strategic support force gives them the visibility of the war, even helps them create a scenario under which the war will be fought by both the countries, and while giving advantage to the Chinese. It's a very, very complicated setup, but very efficient. And they have spent a huge amount of effort in conducting joint drills and all that. So you can see clearly the broad mandate. So they've been created by merging the erstwhile units, which were part of the 3rd Department and 4th Department of the Central Military Commission. So their primary area of interest is to operate across 5 domains. So they believe that the information warfare connects all the 4 wars. Now you can see they have done joint EW operations, electronic warfare, joint cyber operations. Even the space comes under their mandate. Psychological operation, which you have just seen how they have managed Taiwan and other things, also comes under their mandate. So this is the true core of China's cyber. The threat that we should expect is directly coming from the SSF. SSF is the most lethal component of the China's cyber force. You can clearly see the different type of joint combat operations. You can clearly see in these snapshots how SSF is playing a very vital role in helping their Air Force and Navy operate by creating a sufficient cyber environment to operate, and also informatized environment to operate, by creating positive movement or threatening or demoralizing the enemy. All of them are integrated ruthlessly. You can see they have created many new cyber warfare units, which we track also constantly. And they have done many other operations, pretty much like supporting through the theater commands. They have done many joint operations with the SSF. And they're also investing significant amount of money in their cyber warfare capabilities. AI-powered cyber warfare is one major hot, important topic for them. And they have been investing huge amount of money in quantum networks for protecting their integrity, their network's integrity. And of course, satellites is a military domain in China. It is not a civilian domain, unlike India and many other countries. So they are very, very clear. And they've been going to massively recruit people every year across. This is continuing to be happening. Yeah, these are some of the new units which we have tracked. I'm sure you guys can also help us in this venture by continuously tracking them. So these are 4. This is the unit which largely faces India. So Nikon Group is a very old group. It operates from Chengdu. So it continues to do a lot of work related to the Indian Ocean region area, largely including India. Cyber. Chengdu comes under the Western Theater Command only, but yeah, they have done a lot of interesting attacks. Urumqi is another area, another group. This has done a lot of activities in India. Urumqi comes under the Xinjiang of China. The tools and the techniques that they are used again are very, very painstakingly developed tools, but very, very simple tools. We have seen them massively using web shells whenever they conduct multiple attacks, and now not only massively, we can cover them probably in the Q&A session. I think I'm running a little short on time now. So there are also many other operators who operate on Chinese cyber, not just the PLA SSF. The MSS, the Ministry of State Security, also operates a large number of cyber threat attackers. In fact, most of the APT groups that you generally see outside are connected to China through the MSS. And there is also a very interesting group of probably, in my opinion, probably US-based hackers. So they come under the name of Intrusion Truth. And they do a lot of good doxing for the Chinese hackers and highlight the companies through which they operate. So it's another very, very interesting thing to watch. Yeah. Now let's look at the Operation Red Rat. So in Operation Red Rat, basically what we have observed is that there was suddenly upspike in the activity related to two sectors. The sector is the Malaysia and Malaysia we were observing. Then probably the focus of the operation we think was in Vietnam and Thailand. So there's a huge amount of activity which we saw from September 2021 to May 2022. So we believe the operation would have started a couple of months before September 2021. So basically, it's a mobile telecom fraud. That's what we initially had an impression. Once we started digging, we realized the operation is far more clearly targeted. Now, the intended users of the application are the government users in Thailand and Vietnam. Now, I'll show you the snapshots of the pages that they have developed. So basically, the intent of the operation is to make the users download APKs or the iOS packages and run them. Now, the capabilities of the packages and the packages that we have seen blew us away. You can clearly see this is part of an operation to build and develop very, very sensitive assets in these countries. So which is what made us very, very clearly understand that this cannot be a random cyber operation. It could be a targeted operation only. So the brilliant component about this is the lethality of the malware. It was not detected by most of the groups, except I think one marked it as suspicious during the time on Virus Total. Only one marked it as suspicious. Now we look at the capabilities of this. It can create and delete records. Literally, we see the rats trying to steal away the call logs and other details. Now this has a very interesting ability. It can plant GPS coordinates. It can plant contacts. It can plant calls. And it can remove. I mean, it has the ability to make you a victim or suspicious against many other government agencies. Let's say they may say that there was a crime happened, they can plant GPS coordinates in your phone and blackmail you. This was a very, very lethal thing to see. Yeah, I'll show you the pages. This is a government page. This is the actual page. If you translate the page content, you would realize that it is saying that they are from the Economic Enforcement Division and they believe you have done something wrong. So you are asked to compulsorily download the app, update the details, and share it with the government. This is how the whole narrative is. So they drive on fear. Same thing they have done with the Thailand government too. You can see the Economic Crime Suppression Division. So they ran successfully for a lot of time. And I think we believe that they also had a similar campaign in Malaysia, even though we couldn't find any traces but we believe by looking at the IOCs, some of them are active, some of them are not active. So we believe that the operation would have covered them too. Yeah. So you can see when we decompile the code, you can clearly see the components of the code, which shows which actually confirms what we believed. Yeah, and I think I've come to the end of my presentation. I took 2 more minutes. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, and if you have any questions and if you are interested in collaborating with us, please, you're most welcome. Please reach out to us. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer. And before I end my call, there is another call by our research head, Hari, on unmasking Chinese-originated cyber crimes, targeting India at 7:30 p.m. Please do make it a point to attend them too. And we'll be happy to hear from you on whatever you think is good or bad. Yeah. And now I'll also try to answer a couple of questions. Chinese company Baidu has excellent Hindi AI models. I believe they have the capacity to monitor Indian public discourse on a large scale, 100%. Yeah, one by one, I'll go one by one. Yes. See, basically, Chinese see India from 2 different points. The point number 1, they know India is a big market, very, very big market. And Chinese companies, they think that India has the potential to balance out their dependence on America and the West. So they genuinely want to do business in India. But the difficulty is the Chinese companies cannot separate their operations from their government involvement. No Chinese company can ever shield themselves from their government's wishes and wills. We have all seen what happened to Alibaba founder. So this is the reason why they think India is a big market, work for it, but somehow they don't ever make it because Indian government doesn't believe them at all, and they have right reasons to do so. We have always seen it. And after looking at my presentation today, you also would understand it is not practically possible for you to run business in China without the approval of the party. If party doesn't approve of the way you do business or protecting their interests, you will close down the shop in 2 minutes. Even if you're a private company, you are supposed to have a party unit inside. Now that makes it very difficult. But that being said, they still see India as a very big market, and they want to keep operating in India. It could also have national security implications, but otherwise also they see India as a big market. I think there is a second question. I think this one probably we can put. How Chinese adversaries always manage to compromise each and every digital assets better than the Western adversaries? My question, in fact, I would partly agree and I would partly not agree with the question. See, I'll tell you why I agree with it. You have to understand China has a very large population like us. So even if the 0.5% of the Chinese top cybersecurity experts, that would still be around 5-10 lakh people. So the amount of research that you see, if you take it as per capita, it is at par with any other country, part one, part two. And unfortunately in intelligence, unfortunately in defense, the common public only sees what went wrong. They never see what went right. So it is not like they always have an upper hand or they're doing better or not better. So they are like any other country. There is nothing like we can't make them 10 feet and 20 feet. They are whatever height they are, they are. So we tend to see only negative news in the media. So we think that, they're very good at this, we're very good at this. Okay. That being said, my observation, I've been tracking China for some time now. My observation is, generally speaking, they're not very innovative, but they are very methodical and very, very hardworking. So you can see if you're looking at like creating a chain, the exploit chain, people generally give up. They don't. They work on it. They work on it like the way a goldsmith or a blacksmith will work on the beautiful jewel they make. So that type of dedication, probably they get it from the Confucianism they have, or just that the way the China works. Yeah, they excel at methodical, careful, painful work. Not generally a radical new type of a solution. They don't come with that. So which is why a Chinese attacker, let's say a Chinese cyber group targeting you, they will not give up. If they're targeting you, they will keep on attacking you with whatever they have got. So that's how they operate, That's how they operate. Yeah, and the last question, there is two more questions here. Did China also do something during the Ukraine war? I read some articles on how they were attacking Ukraine during the war. So my reading is slightly different. So what generally people believe is that the interception of the Russians and others significantly reduced at a later date. The West could not collect more intelligence about the Russian operations and others, simply because the Russians have shifted to the Huawei platforms and other platforms. Because most of the networking platforms that are run generally come from the Western countries, and we don't know what type of collaborations they have. Yeah, but it is believed that the Chinese did facilitate the Russians from maintaining their operational secrecy in a much better way. So I believe that they have. And I also generally don't believe that the Chinese would want to burn their bridges to the West. Because at the end of the day, Chinese economy survives because of the exports to the West. So, and they still look forward to getting technology from the West to continue to prosper economically. So yeah, I think probably they would continue to underplay their involvement in the war. Of course, they also have no interest in seeing Russia lose the Ukraine war. They want Russia to win the nuclear war, win the Ukraine war, and keep a fight, because that will occupy America's attention in the Ukraine rather than focus on China. I'm sure after the Ukraine war has started, the focus on the US and the China trade war has significantly reduced. Nobody's talking about it. Because at one point in time before the Ukraine war, we had a trade war between the China and the Australia going, China and India going, China and US going. Now, whole of them are off the table. Nobody's talking about it. So this is the best distraction, and I think China would continue to want to see Russia win, or at least keep making good progress against the West in this space. So they would definitely help, but they will do it very, very low profile, because they still have to sell their items to the West. All the manufactured items they have to sell to the West. So that's a big dependency they have. And the last question, I think there one more question. Yeah. Okay, two, three more questions. Are there any connection between Belt and Road Initiative and Chinese cyber threats to India and elsewhere around the world? Very delicate question to answer, but if you see the Belt and Road Initiative, it's an initiative which will increase the market access to Chinese companies. And I'm sure all of you will observe, wherever the Chinese companies go, the PLA follows. When PLA follows, obviously it's not good for us. So there is some element of a risk for us too. Like, for example, they have a huge presence in the Pakistan, like the CPEC, Belt and Road Initiative in Pakistan is called the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So we do have a lot of cyber threats. Now, like I discussed in the earlier presentation also, the new evidences that we find from the Pakistani cyber groups always have some connection or other with the Chinese. Either the payload kits are hosted on Chinese cloud platforms or other reasons, something or another, we always have some hint or another. So I would say generally, yes, there will be a problem for us. Why is India not investing in state-sponsored cyber activities? A very interesting question. Like I said, these are all intelligence operations. I really don't think people will talk about them. And I also want to tell this much with my experience in government. Generally, media covers things that go wrong. The medias don't cover what went right. Like in government, they talk about, an intelligence operation is always in the shadows. It never comes out. And I can tell this much, the Indian agencies or the Indian government is very confident and strong. So it is capable of protecting their own interests. Yes, we do have some confusion in the cyber security sphere, but I would say Indian government is generally very competent and very aware of what is happening, and I'm sure they would have done enough to protect our interests. So I think we should not expect to read that India has invested in state-sponsored cyber activities in the public media. That's not going to happen. No country will do that, and India definitely will not do that. Yeah. Are Chinese groups allied with Israeli intelligence like Mossad or Unit 8200? Are they adversaries? Okay, very important, very interesting question. In my view, see, no intelligence group of a country would trust another intelligence group of another country because they work together, and tomorrow they could be working against each other. But I do believe the Israeli companies would have sold cyber weapons or other things to the Chinese because they've been selling to everyone. So I'm damn sure that the Chinese also would be interested in buying it from them. That is also a very, very high probable event. As you said, Chinese mobile phones send data back to China. So are there any specific hosts identified? Please let me know if I misinterpreted it. Yeah, basically they used to openly do it directly. I think probably around 2017-18 timelines. So there was a lot of hullabulla around that time. So after that, what they have done is they have done domain fronting. I'm sure all of you would know what is domain fronting. So they have done domain fronting by taking 2-3 nodes out of Amazon and other AWS providers. So if you observe the traffic, you will know that the traffic is just being routed via an AWS server or maybe a Microsoft Azure server located in Mumbai and others. But the eventual destination is outside India. So this is one clever trick that they have done to comply and assuage the fears of the people in India, but nothing much has really changed. Are there any additional threat actors except CERT reports, TI services, forums, and security vendors' websites? Okay, it's very delicate answer. It's very, very delicate question. I'll answer it like this. Please keep tracking the IOCs of the earlier threat actors. Like I said, the Chinese have one problem. They don't give up. They keep on trying. They'll keep on trying. So compile the IOCs and just keep at it. You will definitely find a lot of interesting leads coming in from Virus Total or Alien Vault or other places. You will definitely find. And just keep piercing the dot, putting the dots together. You will definitely end up in something very good. So, like I said, Chinese intelligence style is patient and careful. To counter them, we also have to be patient and careful, and very diligent in compiling the pieces together. Next question is there a possibility of numerous mobile scanning applications, those developed in China, not just facilitating document scanning with phone cameras? It is highly possible. Like I said, all the applications in China have to be approved by their own government. So which means all the applications have to route their data, at least the metadata, through the government servers so that they comply with these censorship norms in China. So all the Chinese applications, I would say, are a matter of suspect to us because most of them are made not for you. They are made for the Chinese people. So they are simply putting the same app on the Play Store. It is not like they want to hack you. It is just like, any app made for Chinese people will be censored. So is your data, because for the app, you are also another Chinese citizen, because app doesn't know it's an Indian or it's in, let's say, England guy or UK guy or a German guy. So all the data gets routed, whether you like it or not. That's how it works. So I would say, yeah, take it with a pinch of salt. So it's not a great idea to keep relying. During the launch of Chandrayaan, there were serious attacks by North Korea and China. Is there any chance that the attacks were successful? They somehow tampered. Yeah. So now nobody has a clear answer on that, but I would simply ask you to refer to the ISRO Kudankulam nuclear power plant leaks. 2 actions happened. Now, these actions were observed pretty late, probably around at least 5-6 months after these failures. Now, anybody, we are all cybersecurity students, we can understand how long an operation would take. So probably the operation would have happened in the same period. We don't know that. Basically, the technically correct answer is we have no evidence to confirm, we have no evidence to deny. So both things are there. But I would still hope there has to be something, because this is a matter of great interest to them. How can international collaborations and international intelligence sharing enhance India's overall cyber defense capabilities? Yeah, I think it is very important because, like I said, cyberspace or the cyber space by definition has no boundaries. And imposing national sovereignty in these spaces is very, very difficult. So, and unfortunately or fortunately, if you look at the structure with which the Indian cyberspace is designed, it's open. Unlike the Chinese cyberspace is a walled space. So there is a great firewall or whatever they call it. So it's a walled space. Imagine it like this: India and the America and others are like small, small villages on an open plain, whereas the China is a fort. Correct. So what do these villages do? They sign mutual defense treaties. So if someone comes to attack me, you come and help me. Correct. So that is how it works, and I'm damn sure there are many collaborations and intelligence sharing engagements that are happening. One of the most important ones, the Western space, are called Five Eyes, and there are some reports that India is also an observer in Five Eyes and participates in Five Eyes. So this is a very important area, and I think a lot of coordination is happening in this space. Okay, I find. Did you find any Chinese APT interested in Nepal? What is your observation on this? Not really in Nepal, but I will be very surprised if they are not. I will be really, really surprised if they are not interested in Nepal. So, because the type of activity that I have seen in my experience, I would be really surprised if they are not interested in Nepal. Probably they are already there. So I would definitely believe that, because for multiple reasons. For example, most of the Tibetans who come out of the China mostly end up in Nepal. So from Nepal only they get to India or US and other places wherever they want to go to. This is a matter of great interest to them. And second, Nepal also holds a great strategic significance when it comes, because